Hi, folks. Thank you for tuning in to Sunday School Bonanza, brought to you by those of us at This Week in Mormons. We've got more great gospel doctrine prep for you
We
today.
have bonanzas!
And-
Bonanzas of gospel prep.
And you have missed him on this show, but I'm joined by Al Doan, my co-host on This Week in Mormon.
Oh, hello, you.
Hi,
Hello.
Al. He's here. So
Here I am.
I don't know if I should apologize up front.
For anyone that I might offend.
Yeah. Anyway, let's just move into the let's do it. So this week's lesson is lesson number 38 from the Book of Mormon Manual. It's called "Old Things Are Done Away, and All Things Have Become New." So we're picking up again. We ended the last lesson in 3 Nephi 11 when Christ has descended, giving some instruction to the Nephites. And the chapters we're mostly in today are 3 Nephi chapters 12 through 15. And most of this is just very much Christ's teachings and sermons to the Nephites after he has descended to instruct them. So,
Yeah, so a good chunk of it is taken right out of Matthew. You've probably seen Matthew
I would
before.
rather say that Matthew is taken from Jesus, as is this.
Well, sure, but
I'm just saying.
Matthew noted these things before the Nephites did, approximately 35 to 40 days.
Yeah, okay. Fair
Ish.
enough. Anyway, so yes.
So here in chapter 12 we get started, and it's all the Beatitudes. Now the Beatitudes are interesting. There's one quote that I thought was interesting that, let's see, old President Lee gave. He said, in his Sermon on the Mount, the Master has given us somewhat of a revelation of his own character, which was perfect, or what might be said to be an autobiography, every syllable of which he had written down in deeds, and in so doing has given us a blueprint for our own lives. It's kind of cool to think about, or to read the Beatitudes as something where Christ is trying to portray to us his own character, or like the things that he deems important about his personality. Right? He picks out a few that are good. There's a couple that are interesting that maybe I don't know. Like I don't think that there's any like hidden things in here, but there's a couple that weren't at first very clear to me going in, right? Like things like, let's see, where are they here? Being meek. Meek is one that I always kind of, I don't know. It never really stood out to me as something that I aspire to be.
Right.
But meek, obviously, people define it as power under control, right? And so you people that clearly could handle a situation in a different way. They could, like they're powerful, they're big and strong, but the ones that handle that situation without resorting to violence or things like that. I mean, things like that, right?
Well, and President Hinckley even described, it's funny that you focused on meek, because he says that meekness, this is President Hinckley, says meekness implies a spirit of gratitude as opposed to an attitude of self-sufficiency, an acknowledgement of a greater power beyond oneself, a recognition of God, and an acceptance of his commandments, which...
Yeah, well, other things like being poor in spirit. I mean, these are things. They're things that are a little bit Isaiah-esque in that you can't just read through them very quickly and feel like you got them knocked out. But they're not so hidden that you can't find them. And so take a few minutes and read through these and think about them individually. And I mean, it goes a long way for your lesson this Sunday.
Yeah, I like it. And so there are many great Beatitudes. It's all in, namely the first chunk of verses in chapter 12, and. Check it out. Then we move on later. Christ uses a phrase that we've all heard many times before. If we go into the second section here, he describes the people as the salt of the earth and a light to other people. The actual passage is, let me see if I can read these. I'll actually read
the famous
this.
Phrase, don't throw the salt out with the bathwater.
Yes, it says, verily, verily, I say unto you, I give unto you to be the salt of the earth. But if the salt shall lose its savor, wherewith shall the earth be salted? The salt shall be thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men. Verily, verily, I say unto you, I give unto you the light of this people. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Behold, do men light a candle and put it under a bushel? Nay, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light to all that are in the house. Therefore let your light so shine before this people, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Now, I like going back, a lot of great stuff here, but we get the salt of the earth thing. Whenever I think of salt of the earth, because I think we throw it around, we think of this meaning like, these are like the real people. That's an expression right? Like if you're in the country and you see people, these people are the salt of the earth. But I guess that's sort of accurate, but when you really think about what it actually means this notion of a preservative, so to speak, of righteousness. And Bruce R. McConkie elaborates on this a bit in Mormon Doctrine. He says, among the ancient Hebrews, salt was used as a preservative in seasoning food and in all animal sacrifices. So essential was it to the sacrificial ordinance that it was the symbol of the covenant made between God and his people in connection with that sacred performance. Accordingly, our Lord's statement made first to the Jews and then to the other great body of Hebrews, the Nephites, that they had the power to be the salt of the earth takes on great significance. They had power, in other words, to be the seasoning, savoring, preserving influence in the world, the influence which would bring peace and blessings to all others. So, I don't know about you, Al, but for me, that gives me a lot of a different perspective when I think of you are the salt of the earth. I always picture in my mind that we are the humble people before God, but it actually means that we are here in a special capacity to preserve and ensure that the gospel and all the things surrounding it come to pass in the proper way.
No, that is interesting. I also like the interpretation in Matthew. Reading through that, it gives us the you're the leaven by which the whole loaf is leavened, right?
Right. Yeah.
That same idea that we're expected to be sparse and we'll be like one or two amongst maybe dozens or hundreds, right? And just by being present and having being a peculiar people, being there and being active in our communities and our different circles, we're able to fulfill those roles of like we said, of preserving or just making better, right? That's the
Right.
idea, is that people that have the gospel of Christ are supposed to make people around them happier, better. We're leavening the entire loaf, and if we're not, if we're downers, if we're the guys that are we can't, God, that's not living the gospel. That's
True.
not leavening the loaf.
Very well put. And another great thing to think about, we'll get off the salt thing, but your teacher might do an attention activity, bring in some jars of salt and stuff like that. But there's Carlos E. Ace, old member of the 70, had an interesting quote that he talked to a chemist. He said, a world-renowned chemist told me that salt itself will not lose its savor with age. Savor is lost through mixture and contamination. So that's another great way to look at it, that we are the salt of the earth, but we will only lose our potency and our fullest ability if we are contaminated with other influences that
Get your hand off my tail, you'll make it dirty.
that make us less whole. Yes. So
Okay, so the next section we focus on, Jesus declares that he has fulfilled the law of Moses, and he teaches the people a higher law. So this was big for back in the day, right? I mean, this was
this was huge.
a monster statement to come in and say, yeah, that thing you've been living for the last X number of thousands of years, good job. First, really good work, everybody. And second, you don't need to do it anymore. I've got it from here. And so he goes through a chapter and talks about, he gives the Moses, the law of Moses equivalent, and then says, and here's what the real law is, right? So he goes through things like, if thou shalt not murder, what you should actually do is not even call your brother,
Right.
not even be angry, right? Thou shalt not commit adultery, sure, but don't lust either. That's the root of the law. And so for us, I mean, I think we fall into this same danger where we've done things in our, in a social way, where we've shored up a lot of the laws, a lot of the the don't lust, the don't kill and that kind of stuff. The don't lust and the don't be angry, and we've shored those up with, and what that means is don't look at pornography, don't look at this, don't do that. So we've given ourselves kind of a Moses-like law that surrounds it, and it's a good exercise to go back and say, well, what is the root of this? Why do we do this? And if you'll notice in General Conference, when the apostles address any of these things, right, like purity, Jeffrey R. Holland gave a great talk on why we stay, why this is even a law. Faith, all these things, they go right to the root of it. And so that should be an exercise that we go through as well, and not get hung up so much on the exterior effects of it.
Very well said, sir. The law of Moses actually fascinates me, just because I just can't imagine what it would have been like to even be taught that this will be fulfilled someday, and to have someone actually show up and say, "All right, it's happened."
You're the guy. You're the guy.
And obviously, the very existence of Jews today is a testament to the refusal to acknowledge that your Messiah is here. Believe in it, And I think extra credit, I can't imagine being a Nephite, especially because the Lord's mortal ministry did not happen in the Americas at all, and they had to have all of this faith that all of this was going down for all that time until he showed up. In our final little bits here, we bounce around some chapters, but mostly we talk about how Jesus taught the Nephites how to live to be his true disciples. And one of the ones that I love, the way this leads off in chapter 13, very first verse, he says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, I say that ye should do alms unto the poor, but take heed that ye do not your alms before men, not to be seen of them. Otherwise ye have no reward of your Father who is in heaven. Therefore, when ye shall do your alms, do not sound a trumpet before you, as will hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father who seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly. And when thou prayest, thou shalt not do as the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward."
Yeah, dude, that's a tough little conundrum.
It changed a bit, but I actually, the prayer thing is one thing, but I like that he says, give your alms to the poor, help these people out. We have a responsibility for that. But this isn't about seeking out the glory and putting up a note that says, "Look at me, everyone. Look what I've done. I am helping. I am helping."
I hope your teachers discuss this, because I think that's a fascinating discussion to say, how do you do your alms in secret but still leaven the earth, right? How do you still be that salt that savors while not trying to
draw attention to
it? But to that, if I may, Jeff, like one of the most chilling phrases in the scriptures for me that you hear a couple of times is where they say, "Verily I say unto you, they shall have their reward." Like, there's no more frightening thing for me than, like, you get to heaven and you're like, "Look, God, look at all this stuff I did for you." He's like, "All right, you got your reward." You're like, "No, wait, what?"
And I like what you said there, Al, for a second. How do we still be the salt of the earth and have this effect when we're trying to do our things in secret, to not draw attention to it? And I even see those parallels today. I think that we honestly have a sort of a challenge to face. It, like things like Mormon helping hands. It's great that we do all of this and that we help out in the community, and it's good PR for us, but I think it's hard to say that we're sitting there giving our alms in secret in this case. We're very clearly drawing attention to ourselves. But where's that balance? Where's that balance between quietly helping the community and not asking for anyone to care or pat us on the back, and for the sake of the mission of the church, the broader aspects of things that help the overall church growth in the long run? There's a lot of things to think about.
And
please.
To end, there's in chapter 15, verse 8, or verse 8 and 9, right? He says, "For behold, the covenant which I have made with my people is not all fulfilled, but the law which was given unto Moses hath an end in me. Behold, I am the law and the light. Look unto me, and endure to the end, and ye shall live. For unto him that endureth to the end will I give eternal life." And I think for the Nephites at this time, if you can put yourself in their shoes, this was, a lot of great promise here, but a lot of change for them. And so, I mean, just reading through this in their shoes is kind of fascinating for me. So I love that verse. I love it today. I suspect they loved it then.
It's a great verse.
Good chapter.
There's a lot of other good stuff. Read this lesson because you find great teachings about, we skipped so much because there's only so much to handle. 14 has a lot of good stuff. Jesus even teaches about divorce. This is when he also drops the lines talking about the other sheep of this fold. There's a lot of very valuable stuff.
They were the sheep. That's why that was so exciting.
In these chapters. So read these, prepare yourself.
He found them.
And it'll be good. And you can find this, of course, on iTunes for Sunday School Bonanza. You can find us at thisweekinmormons.com, facebook.com/thisweekinmormons, at The Real Twim on Twitter, and shoot us an email, contact@thisweekinmormons.com. Al, thanks for showing up today.
Anytime, brother.
Nice to have you here. This has been Lesson 38. Old things are done away, and all things have become new. Brought to you by Sunday School Bonanza. And may you have a great Sunday. Bye-bye.